Welcome to Season 2, Episode 5 of FBC Seminoles The Table Podcast. This season is titled Seeds of Eden, and will dive into practical Christian living and how anyone can make a difference in the lives of those around them. On today's episode, you will hear from Tanner Moore, Todd Warren, Sean Decker, and Ryan Froese. Thank you for joining us at the table.
All right, man, we're back for round 5 now.
Yeah. Here we go.
We got Ryan joining us this time in Garrison's place. And we still got Sean and Todd here with us, and of course I'm Tanner. And we've been on this journey of planting seeds of Eden. And you know, the last time we were together, we talked about what's the difference between avoiding conflict and making peace, and how, you know, maybe it's time as a follower of Jesus that we start playing offense a little bit and not only play defense. And that, you know, part of the call of Jesus is to seek out those places in our world that are broken and that are that don't have peace. Because being a peacemaker, I think, you know, you pointed out, Todd, is that you're going to create it in a place that it did not previously exist, right? You're making it, and you can't make peace if you're always avoiding those places of conflict and those places of tension. And then, Sean, you closed us off by saying that something about how that can get messy. Let's dive into that a little bit. I want you to tell me what you're thinking there, and let's just see where that goes.
Well, we had talked about this idea of gardening. How can we be a gardener of Eden in the Babylon where we live? And then we talked about not just harvesting, kind of just hoarding it all. There's that isolation idea, right? But you know, how can we be more offensive in what we do? And I was just saying, it's going to get messy. You know, gardening, if that's where we're headed, gardening is messy, and there are thorns and there are weeds, and there are, you know, you're going to cut yourself every now and then. And but you know, if we're really headed towards the end result, and I think, not to be too scriptural, like if we're thinking of a soul harvest, that's like a Tim LaHaye Left Behind book, by the way. If we're thinking about that, we'll go back
Trying so hard not to make a joke. Trying so hard not to. I'm about to self-destruct. Sorry,
but you know, saying if the harvest is what we're really after of people, it's going to be messy. And
So you said just now, first of all, that if we want to be offensive, and what you mean is if we want to offend people, right? I'm joking. No, no, that's not what that means. Okay. No, I'm joking. Your face said, "Oh, please don't go there."
Did I say that?
No, but you made some really good analogies, and I want to kind of flesh those out a little bit. You said there are thorns. Okay, explain that metaphor. What does that mean, that there are thorns? When you garden, there are thorns.
Well, it's you know, when you talk about there's another parable about planting seeds, right? And there are different places where you plant seeds in the rocks and in the sand and among thorns. Well, in that parable, the plant grows up and it's immediately choked out by the thorns. And so I think there's going to be, in that aspect, there's going to be people or things that will try to really choke what you're trying to do, or choke the good things that you're trying to grow. Right?
Choke out the plant that you have planted.
Yeah.
Or try to choke the life out. What did Jesus mean in that parable? Matthew 13, I think, is in the Matthew part of the story. What did Jesus mean when he was talking about those thorns? Like, what are some specific things that maybe are thorns that choke out the seed that Jesus is the Word of God in the parable, right? What are some thorns in our world that make a mess?
Immediately I just thought sin, the sinful things that overtake us.
Okay.
And keep us from flourishing, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought of pride.
Ooh, yeah.
And in some of this, like where gardening is messy, and making peace can be messy. I think about in instances where I could have made peace. Like I look at times into myself as like is it hypocritical of me to say, like, look at what I've done, and now I'm going to come in here and try to whatever it is, make peace in this situation. And I think a lot of times in situations where, like for me, where I can make peace, I avoid it because of what somebody else will say.
Sure.
Maybe about me.
Yep.
In that situation,
Absolutely. I know what you mean. Yeah.
And so that's a thorn. That's that's prideful. And
yeah.
Really, a
go
thorn. A thorn could be others' perception, right,
Yeah.
of what we're doing or how they will judge us, or
Oh yeah,
right?
We're going to get all therapeutic today. Let's have a little therapy session, and I'm the therapist asking the questions. Y'all gonna have to answer. I guess so. Ryan, you're a deacon here at the church, and deacons never catch any kind of grief. So there's never any pushback to the deacons. I know that. Sean, that's sarcasm, obviously. What I mean is you're probably familiar with, you're acquainted with conflict
Absolutely.
in that. Sean, your whole career has been working in the church. And then, Todd, you've worked on staff at churches before.
Yep.
And you've also worked a job that is, there's a lot of pushback in being a coach, high school coach. And I've worked on staff at several churches, and I'm a coach as well.
Yeah.
The point I'm making is that all of us are familiar, and Ryan, you're a coach, so you're a deacon and a coach, right? That we're familiar with those thorns or the perception. I'm curious, can you think of a time in your service where there was a thorn that inhibited your attempt to serve, or that somebody said something about you, or you were worried about perception, and so maybe you didn't reach out, you didn't garden because you were worried about what someone might say or think? Like, can you think about a time in your journey, in your walk with Jesus, that happened? When it got a little bit messy?
I can think of quite a few, but I don't know. I think probably the most back to, obviously I'm a new deacon, so I haven't had many situations like that yet in the church, but in my coaching life, I've had people come after me before, and
Sure.
I mean, I've literally had somebody tell me, I'm going to get you fired.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing, and
Yeah.
So yeah, there's been quite a bit. I think what the hardest part of that is, and I've learned from some coaches that have kind of taught me how to handle those situations, how to handle it correctly, and I've seen some people who don't handle it very well. And the first thing I think of is the first coach that I coached football for. He always talked about how sometimes what parents want is just to be heard, and just sit there and let them yell at you.
Yeah.
Let them get their anger out and their frustration, and then just tell them that you care and you do want them to be heard. And so yeah, that's pretty. That's a hard thing to do, but I don't know. I could go into more detail, but I don't know that it'd do a whole lot of good.
And I'm not asking you to do not good, but I am, I am asking you to be real and say, have there been times when you've tried to be a witness for Jesus, or you've tried to use our analogy, garden the Babylon you live in, and you've experienced a little bit of a mess as a result? That thorny, maybe you got cut, like what you're talking about.
I mean, I think for me, and of course I won't go super specific either,
Sure.
but and I've served in other churches before we came here, and believe it or not, there are people that don't like me, and
That is hard to believe.
and they
Okay, look, hold on. If there are people that don't like Sean Decker, that means that there is nobody who can make everyone happy. I'm serious. Like, come on. If Sean has people who don't like him, then there's no hope for any of us.
oh man.
Okay, keep going.
So, whether it was maybe my leadership style or my worship style or you name it, there have been people in the ministry that we went to church with that we just didn't jive. And what I was doing, and Todd as a worship pastor before, he can probably relate to that. Like, it doesn't matter really what you do. There are some that it's not their thing.
Yeah.
What you're doing is not for them. Or maybe you don't fit the mold that they thought you should, or maybe that it comes down to preference or whatever. And so, yeah, there's some early on in ministry, I think I took it really hard, very personally.
Sure.
And I thought, wow, this person just doesn't like me as a person. And I think deep down that wasn't really the case.
Right.
I think I just wasn't really, what I didn't line up with their preferences or what they really wanted or whatever. But yeah, it was very thorny, and it took some growth in me. And I took it really hard. Like, there was times I was like, maybe I'm not supposed to do this. Maybe this isn't really where I'm supposed to be.
And thank God you didn't stop. I mean, really, thank God that you're still doing it, because think about the impact that he has every week. And
Absolutely.
beyond just Sunday mornings, but I mean, think about how, and this is not a knock against anybody else who ever comes and leads worship here, Sean, but like, we feel it when you're not here. I do, I feel it when you're not doing it, because you're that good at it, and really thank God that you didn't stop when it got thorny, and I'm sure there are times it still gets thorny for you.
Well, and you guys can relate, whether it's we call it ministry, but what you guys do is ministry too. And there are seasons of ministry, seasons of coaching, seasons of life that are super hard. And anybody who's been a part of this church for any length of time knows that there's been hard seasons here.
Yeah.
Whether we were between leadership or, it just, the church was not in the healthiest of places, and things that we've been very open about, looking back on times when our church wasn't in a healthy place. And so we've been here a long time, so we came in 2010. What years are now?
24.
Yeah, so we're knocking on 14 years.
Yeah.
And so we've seen a lot of life in this church and seen some really amazing things. And we've been a part of some hard seasons too. And honestly, there were times when we were like we'd go home and my wife Amber would be like let's go. Like, is it time for us to go? Honestly, well, you had those talks like, is it time for us to do something else?
Yeah.
Anything else at this point? Because
Yeah.
it was just hard.
Yeah.
There were seasons when a lot of our best friends in town, people that we knew from church, all started either retiring or moving off to other places, moving to other churches to lead there, and so there were times when we had nobody. Some of our best friends in the world left, and so we're like, God, what are we still doing here? And so it was messy, and it was thorny, and it was hard, and it was painful, and we wanted to kind of stop gardening at that point.
Yeah. Do you think that sometimes that makes people stop? Or maybe it makes people not even really want to get started, because you know that, boy, if I start cultivating this land, there's going to be some thorns. I'm going to get poked. I mean, do you think that sometimes that stops us from what we're doing, or even stops us from getting started with following Jesus in a practical way?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it goes right back to what we talked about last episode, avoiding conflict versus making peace, creating something, like knowing that there are going to be thorns or experiencing a thorn sure makes it easier to avoid the conflict.
That's right.
And to isolate.
Yeah, it is.
And so, like, being intentional about what we do and why we do something becomes so much, so important in those situations.
What do you think, Ryan? Do those thorns, or even the potential for thorns, does that stop people sometimes from following Jesus, or does that make us want to just avoid or isolate ourselves?
Absolutely.
And what do you think about that?
I think about it in the coaching world a lot because it's gotten harder and harder. Even I've been doing this for 10, almost 11 years now, and it's harder than whenever I started. There's just, with video and people wanting perfect referees and no mistakes, the cancel culture that we live in, it just makes everything harder.
And working in an industry that is so broadcast. I mean, every high school game in America is now broadcast live. You're right. Like you work in an industry that you are on display for everybody to judge every week.
Yep.
And
there's always two viewpoints.
The winner and the loser, baby.
Yeah. And
thank goodness. I'm just kidding. I'm joking. Go ahead.
No, but and not just that. I think about it like as a coach, the decisions that you make. Play this kid makes this parent mad, makes the other one happy, and it's just a hard thing to do, and I think I've seen people leave because of it.
Sure.
And I think that's what's hard, because to do it correctly is so difficult at times that it's easier to just go do something else. And the sad part is to do it the wrong way is almost like easier. You see what I'm saying?
What do you mean by do it the wrong way?
Like if you're just in it to win or to build your career.
Okay.
Like I feel like in high school sports that's not that difficult anymore. You can I've known people that in my opinion shouldn't even be a coach and have gotten head jobs and all kinds of stuff just because they've moved around and tried to build their pedigree or whatever.
Sure.
Even though they're not doing it for
resume
the right
building,
reasons.
using people to inflate your own status, and
basically using jobs as a stepping stone.
Sure.
Or people as a stepping stone.
Yeah.
It's hard to stay in one place, and I don't say that to down people that move around. I mean, sometimes God calls you elsewhere,
Sure.
And there's a chance God calls me elsewhere at some point. But people that do that just to build their career and it's not for the kids, I think that's easier.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to worry about.
It's not as messy.
No, you don't have to worry about real relationships with people. You can just hang out with your staff by yourself, and then you don't get involved in the community. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because getting involved is hard. I've actually had this conversation before with a couple of people, but being a coach and going to the local church is not easy. That is extremely difficult, and people don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Most coaches that I know that I've worked with, when they've lived in Seminole, they've gone to church in Hobbs. Some people drive all the way to Lubbock.
Yeah. I was going to bring that up, actually, because I work in the industry with you, and I've experienced that.
Because it's hard, because you're coach everywhere.
Yeah.
You don't get to just be, I don't get to just be Ryan.
Yep.
I am coach wherever I go.
Yeah.
And so that's hard, because sometimes you don't want to. You don't want to deal with those things at church or
But
at
isn't that the
store.
tension that we're talking about here is like we're pulling those two people that like the desire I have to just be Tanner. But see, here's what when I say to just be Tanner, this is what it means. The perfect pretty version of Tanner that people see at church that preaches on Sunday mornings and that is, scholarly and well spoken and will greet you with a handshake and boy, I can make that Tanner look good, right? But see, I'm the same jerk that benched your kid on Friday night or whatever.
Yeah.
And what about the times when I let my emotions get the best of me? And I'm not perfect.
Absolutely.
And now I got to go face the music on Sunday. And I got to stand in the tension of the Tanner I want to be and the coach more that I am sometimes, and that tension of pulling those two people closer together and say, how can I take this fake version of Tanner, but the aspirational version that wants to be that good thing, and bring it closer to the real version of Tanner that I am on Monday through Saturday, and bring those people together so that I do have those real relationships, and the people that I live with Monday through Saturday are still the people that I go to church with on Sunday, and it's not a separate relationship.
Yeah.
We've got a Saturday relationship of athletics, and we've got a Sunday relationship for church. And there's tension whenever there's conflict in those, right? Whenever those two relationships are not the same. And I got to find a way to pull those relationships and make them the same.
Yeah.
And boy, that's hard.
Yeah.
Boy, that's hard.
Kendall and I have had conversations about how I feel like I live two different lives sometimes, and I like it. Yeah.
And you're living right now in the tension of the Ryan that you want to be and you want people to see you as. And it's not because you're egotistical, it's because you're aspirational. You know what Jesus has called you to be, and you know who you want to be. But and the reason I'm saying this is just because I'm speaking from my experience, but then there's the Ryan that you really are, which isn't perfect. Right? And then
Near perfect, but
it's close. Probably the closest of anybody at the table, but
That's right.
you do have those conspiracy theories.
that is probably the furthest thing from the truth. But anyway.
And so the call and the challenge for you is, how do you now pull those two people together into, but see, boy, the reason it gets so hard sometimes to get involved in church is because on Monday through Saturday, you're a little bit of a mess. Right? But now I got to show up to clean church on Sunday?
Yeah.
You're telling me that, but see, what about when people see my mess? Like, gardening is messy.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that we avoid trying to like make an impact for Jesus, because if I put myself out there to make an impact, people are going to see me and realize that I'm not perfect and I'm messy.
Yeah.
And I would just rather, and then what's going to happen when they judge me for being messy? And I would just rather not do it at all. That way I can keep my pristine image, at least, maybe some self-image. And I would just rather not do it all than display my mess.
Do you know what's interesting here? I'm thinking, we're talking about ministry, we're talking about coaching. You can insert whatever you are,
right.
and we're all in the same boat.
Yes.
Right? We teachers or bankers. If you work in the oil field, like that is a messy situation. To be a believer in the oil field, it's hard. We have so many great men in our church who work in the oil field and who are leaders in our church and in the oil field as well. And you ask them, and it's hard because talk about tension, it's there. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you have this idea that you've got to have it all together, right? That your kids, if people see that your kids aren't in line, well, then that affects the perception of you as a mother. Like that's your full-time job, right? So insert whatever occupation wherever we are, right. And we're all in the same boat.
That's exactly right.
Like we all feel like we've got to show ourselves to have it all together, and heaven forbid people see our junk drawer. You talked about that yesterday.
Yeah.
Or see our messy floor when they come over. That this is a plug for yesterday. If you what day was it? Golly, what day was it yesterday?
21st.
Yeah. So if you haven't, go back and watch the sermon from April 21st on our church website or Facebook page, because Tanner was really good about about sharing that and being. And why don't we let people into our messes more, right? And
because really, Jesus into our mess.
Yeah. Because really, it just brings you closer together.
Yep.
When I think about our small group ministry, and the reason I think the groups that are successful, the reason they are successful is because they're real with each other. We've figured out that if you have people in your home, it doesn't have to be perfect, and stuff's going to get broken, and it's just gonna, mess is gonna happen. But people, when they come into your house and see that you've got some laundry over here on the couch, they're like, oh wow, like they have laundry too.
They're messed up too.
You know what I mean?
They don't hang up their clothes either.
It's amazing what, that's real community when
Yeah.
you can come and realize hey, we're in this together. So I just thought that was interesting that insert whatever your Eden looks like, we're all facing the same thing, and
Yes.
it's all the same struggle and the same
Yep.
tension. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah, and right at the end of the sermon, I shared a story in the second service that I didn't share in the first service. That, right now, and you guys might, I don't know, maybe you can relate, but right now, the season of life that I'm in is that I don't get to listen to sermons at church. It's just the stage of life that I'm in.
Yeah.
I've got a 4-year-old, I've got one that's about to turn 2, and I've got one that's about to be born. And so the sermons that I get to listen to are the ones that I play on podcasts in my truck, and the ones that I'm preaching. But if I'm sitting in the seats on Sunday morning, I'm spending almost the whole service redirecting my 2-year-old and 4-year-old, right? And trying to tell them that we don't drive our tractor up and down the aisle. We keep our stuff right here on the seat, and we, my section of church, my little pew is a mess, y'all. Is a mess. There's Paw Patrol gummy snacks flying all over the place, and there's crayons rolling up and down the aisle, and there's tractor wheels flying off, and then all of a sudden my kids start fighting each other, because they don't care. They don't know. And so my 4-year-old takes a dinosaur away from my 2-year-old, and he's like, no, my dino. And he just starts swinging, And you talking about peacemaking. I'm sitting in church, and I'm having to break up a fight in the pew, right? But, And I made the comment from the stage, but I really mean this. I said, listen, I've made the decision that if I'm going to not listen to a sermon, I'm going to not listen to a sermon in church.
That's good. That's so good.
Right? Look, and this goes for everybody who's yeah, your life is messy. Me too. But my life's going to be messy in church.
Good.
You know what? My witness is messy. As I try to garden the world I live in, I don't do it perfect all the time. I can tell you the regrets and the students that I have missed. The opportunities that I've let slip by, the times when I let my emotions get out of control and I damaged a relationship with a student or a coworker. Boy, the list goes on, and I'm a mess. But I'm a mess for Jesus. And I'm not claiming that I got this thing down perfectly. I don't. I am claiming that I'm not letting my mess stop me from trying.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be a mess, I'm going to be a mess in church. Because what's the alternative? To be a mess outside of church? I'm going to be a mess either way. But the only thing I know is that Jesus can wash my mess. He can clean me up. And that's the only, right? He's the only one who can. And so for anybody who's listening, we're talking about practical Christian living. I think what's important is to know that you don't have to have it all together to live for Jesus in your community. You don't have to be perfect to seek out places of tension in your town. You don't have to have it all together to show up on a Sunday morning. You don't have to have it all together to get involved in the community like you're talking about. You don't have to have it all together to volunteer, to serve, to mow your neighbor's grass. Don't let the mess of your life get in the way, because guess what? Those people that you're volunteering to serve, they're just trying to help, they're messy too, man. And I think you pointed out just now, kind of indirectly, but what we realize is that, dude, we're all a mess.
Yeah.
And following Jesus is messy. And I don't know where we got this conception that following Jesus was going to be pretty. Yeah. And it, maybe it became a cultural status symbol to be a Christian, and this kind of 1950s idyllic American dream. I go to church. Dude, that don't exist. Being a gardener is messy. One more story, and then I'll stop talking so much. But about 4 years ago, my wife and I were looking for a new washer and dryer, and my wife was adamant that we're going to buy a washing machine with a central agitator. You know what that, like, it's got
Yeah.
the in the middle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Kelly, why? Like, that limits our options so much.
Oh, yeah.
You know how many washing machines they make today with the central agitator? And I'm like, why? And she said, because my mom always had a washing machine with a central agitator, right? Well, of course, you guys know me. I'm like, dude, the way we've always done things is the last phrase in my vocabulary, you know? I'm like, let's push the envelope forward. Let's move ourselves into century 21. And, but here's what she says. Okay, her dad is a farmer, right? He's like a mass gardener.
Yeah. There you go.
And he gets so dirty doing that job that the only washing machine that works on the farm is one with the central agitator. Or else his clothes are not going to, right? And so guess what my washing machine at my house has? A central agitator. And it's because my father-in-law is a big-time gardener. Like, you know, I don't mean that insulting. I hope he's not.
That's
You know what I mean.
a great way to put it, really.
Here, my point is this. When you try to grow something, you're going to get dirty. If you try, you're going to get dirty. You're going to be a mess. Your mess is going to be revealed. You're going to make a mess. There's going to be a mess. Should that stop us from getting involved? You know. All right, I'll stop. What are your thoughts at this point?
It just makes me think of, you know, maybe the reason that we think, or like there's this idea that it's not okay to not be okay at times is, you know, a lot of what is taught in a lot of churches is like a morality gospel, you know, and don't do this and don't do that, and you need to do this and you can't be that, you know, don't. And so when we're not those things, then, you know, we want to hide and, you know, we think it's not okay to be a mess. And when in reality, of course, we all know that, like, gardening's going to be messy, life's going to be messy because, like, we're a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it involves other people.
Yeah, us and other people.
Yep. And so you put me as a mess and you as a mess, and we got to figure something out. We're going to make a mess.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to make a mess
Yeah.
of it. Yeah. What do you think?
I was just thinking, you know, like how much more of an impact you can have, and if you're watching or listening, for people to see your mess, right? To let somebody in and be vulnerable and potentially get hurt, but the impact that you can have. And when I think about, like, all three of you guys have little kids, and it's hilarious because my kids aren't that little anymore. And so when they're running around church and jumping off the stage and stuff, like, it's hilarious because I was there once. And I remember, you know, I know there are some parents that, usually first-time parents, when they come in, and if their baby starts crying, they're so freaked out, like that everybody is judging them, or, you know, they're so worried about their baby crying in church.
Right.
And if you ask anybody, like if you ask our senior adult crowd, one of the sweetest sounds that they hear in church is a baby crying. Because they're there. Because mom and dad have made a commitment that we're going to be in church. And it's going to be messy and the kids are going to be loud. But I guarantee you, your 2-year-old and your 4-year-old and your 5 and 6-year-old and whatever, like, they're picking up on so much more than we realize. You know, they're hearing gospel. They are being gardened here, not just at this church, but other churches where parents are plugging their kids in. And so, like, I just want to encourage, because we have so many young families with little kids,
Right.
and I'm like, bring them, man.
Yeah. Make a mess in the sanctuary.
Absolutely.
Come make a mess.
Like,
we'll clean the crayons.
We will, and if it's loud, who cares?
Yeah.
because that's a sign in my book of a healthy church, is when you hear kids playing and laughing and cutting up or whatever. And so I'm like, be willing to get messy, but also show other people, that you're kind of messy as well.
And then my next question is, and do we take the same attitude with those people in our community who are unchurched? Come bring me your mess.
Yeah.
I'll clean up the crayons.
Yeah.
But I want you, I'm not talking about coming into church.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'll have grace for that young family bringing their mess into church because I want them to be in church.
Sure.
Am I willing to extend the same grace to an unchurched, divorced dad that I meet at Stripes? Do I have the same grace of, dude, your life is a mess. Come make a mess. Don't worry, we can clean it up. But I want to get to know you.
Yeah.
I want to just take a little bit of time to understand your life. I want to just be something of a positive influence in your world right now, and just make you believe that there's hope.
Yeah.
I just want to give you some hope. That's it. So make a mess. Okay. Say those cuss words. Like, okay, we'll work on it. We'll work on it. Okay. Say them. I'm not interested in cleaning you up right now. I'm interested in planting a seed of Eden in your life. That's it.
Yeah.
So, you're messy. Did you know that there's hope for you? Like, it's going to be okay. Or let me encourage you to just, hey man, I hope you have a great day today. Let me buy that Stripes burrito you're about to buy.
That's right.
Like, do we have the same grace for that guy that we have for those young families coming in on Sunday morning?
That's good.
You see what I'm asking? Yeah. And that's where you plant your Eden seeds.
Yeah.
And at church.
Yeah.
And also outside of church. Yeah.
Well, I love that. I mean, this whole series, this season is about that. It's about living this as a citizen of Eden in church and out of church.
Right.
And we had talked about in the last episode, I think, finding the tension and going to those places, looking for tension. And I think sometimes we walk around with blinders on, and maybe that's the isolation part. We walk around with blinders on that we don't want to see the tension. And if we just take them down for a minute, the tension's already there. Like, it's everywhere we go.
Yeah, it is.
It's the waitress that brings us our food that is maybe trying to figure out how she's going to pay rent this month, and or buy food for her kids, or maybe it's the guy at the gas station who, like, he's trying to. He doesn't have enough money to buy gas to get to a job interview. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think it's everywhere we are. It's a kid in your class who, whose parents are going through a divorce right now, right? Like, it's
absolutely.
I think the tension is there if we take time to look for it.
That's right.
And not avoid it. Right.
That's right.
That's my thought.
That's good. That's good. Any closing remarks to wrap this one up? All right, man. Well, hey, if you're listening, be blessed. Be a mess. Don't be afraid of being a mess. Don't be afraid of the thorns, because they're there. Yeah. Like if you want a garden, you're going to have to cultivate some land that's going to have some thorns and some rocks in it, okay? So just know that going in. Don't let that stop you. I think what you'll find is it's really not as bad as what people make it out to be. But on the other hand, don't be worried that you're not qualified to do it, because you're also a mess. Because the reality is all of us are messy, right? So don't let the mess stop you, and then realize that, like, this job of gardening in Babylon is going to make a mess. You're going to get dirty. It's not always going to be pretty or perfect. There are going to be times you try to serve Jesus and it doesn't go the right way. There are going to be times when you pour everything into somebody and they totally refuse and walk away from you. You're going to invest money and resources and time and energy that sometimes you're going to feel like it almost feels like it just got wasted, right? Like it's messy. But what I'm encouraging you as a listener is the reward is not in the result. The reward is in the obedience to the call of God on your life to cultivate the Babylon that you live in. And what you realize is you're able to come into relationship with God in a new and deeper way, and you realize that that's what the true blessing is in and of itself. So don't let the mess scare you. Don't let it push you away. We're all messy. So go find a mess to get yourself into this week.
Thanks for listening to FBC Seminoles, The Table Podcast. A new episode will be released each Monday. We invite you to pull up a chair and join our table each week as we dig into God's Word together. We would love for you to join one of our Connect groups that meets throughout the week and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:30. If you'd like more information, you can call our church office at 432-758-3291 or visit our website at fbcseminole.org.